Why did every man in that room laugh when she walked in? Because to them, she was a joke, a Navy woman holding a sniper rifle in a Ranger base built on old grudges and dust. Chief Petty Officer Aria Blackwood didn't flinch when the laughter started. She'd heard worse, in training, in the teams, in rooms where her name came with an asterisk. But out here, in the thin Afghan air, it hit different. Laughter had a sharper edge when it came from men who believed the war belonged only to them. The sergeant leaned against a sandbag wall, a half-chewed cigar dangling from his mouth. What's a Navy woman doing with a real sniper rifle, playing dress-up for Instagram? The others snorted, not even trying to hide it. Their uniforms were dust-streaked, their eyes glassy with the kind of fatigue that makes arrogance feel like armor. Aria didn't respond. She just set the long, hard case on the bench and unlatched it. Inside, the matte black of her Macmillan TAC-50 gleamed against the harsh light. She checked the bolt, the bipod, the scope, each motion precise, methodical. The wind outside whistled through the valley like a warning. 3 hours later, that same wind would carry the echo of a shot that rewrote what they thought was possible. But for now, all she did was breathe, steady, silent, unreadable. Coral Valley, eastern Afghanistan. A landscape carved by war and time, mountains jagged as broken teeth, valleys cut deep by the ghosts of artillery. From their observation post, you could see the world fade into haze, Pakistan on the far horizon, its ridgelines like shadows of another life. She arrived 48 hours ago, Navy Special Warfare sniper, temporarily attached to the 75th Ranger Regiment for Joint Overwatch Operations. A guest, they called it. She knew what they really meant. Outsider. Add-on. To them, she was just a quiet woman in Navy camas who carried a rifle too big for her frame and a past too classified to be believed. They didn't know her unit name. They weren't cleared to. And in their world, secrecy often meant make-believe. So they mocked what they didn't understand. But mockery doesn't bruise steel, it tempers it. She adjusted the TAC-50's bipod, feeling its weight settle against her shoulder. 8 years in special warfare had taught her one thing: there's no such thing as fair respect. You earn it every time. Her spotter, Petty Officer Travis "Hawk" Jensen, said nothing, just handed her the kestrel. He was one of the few who'd served with her before. They had a rhythm, a quiet language built through the kind of silence that only exists between people who have seen death together. She input the numbers: wind gradient, temperature, humidity, air density, all variables that didn't care about ego. Down in the valley, the Rangers had set up their forward assault plan. The mission was straightforward, at least on paper. A U.S. contractor, David Morrison, was being held in a mud brick compound roughly 2,800 meters out. Hostage. Possible execution. The assault team would move in after dark. But Aria had already seen what the Rangers hadn't. The compound had no secondary exits. 2 guards rotated every 2 hours, and the hostage, shackled, kneeling, visible through a window, had the hollow look of a man who'd stopped believing anyone was coming. That look haunted her more than she wanted to admit. The briefing that morning had been a test, though not the kind the Rangers thought it was. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brenner, the Ranger sniper lead, stood at the head of the table with a map stretched flat before him. "We're setting overwatch positions here and here, 2 clicks max. We'll maintain comms with the assault element. The Navy attachment can observe." Aria slid a folder across the table. Inside, her range card meticulously drawn. "I can cover the compound from 2,817 meters. Line of sight confirmed. Wind corridors mapped." Brenner blinked, then laughed. "Chief, that's almost 3 clicks. Nobody makes shots like that, not even the Canadians." His tone softened, like he was explaining something to a child. "You'll spot for us, keep your scope warm." The laughter spread again. Someone muttered something about Hollywood snipers and female math. Arya didn't bother replying. She just looked at the map again, then at the window. The wind was moving from west to east, just enough to matter. She'd already calculated it 3 times. Distance, 2,817 meters. Bullet flight time, 3.7 seconds. Elevation hold, 5.2 mils. Wind drift 2 left. The math didn't care if you laughed. That night, as the sky turned copper and then black, she climbed to the observation post. The air was cold enough to taste, thin, sharp. She could hear the rangers down below, voices over the radio, check-ins, a joke about Navy coffee, the kind of noise people make before violence. Hawk sat up beside her, scanning through his spotting scope. "You really think you can hit from here?" he asked quietly. Arya didn't answer right away. She adjusted her cheek weld, centered the crosshairs on the compound, and whispered, "We'll know if we have to." He nodded, no more words needed. Hours passed, silence settled like frost, the valley didn't move. Then a flicker, movement. She caught it first, a figure being dragged out into the courtyard, hands bound, kneeling. Morrison. Another figure followed the executioner, the camera, the knife. Her pulse slowed, training took over, every breath became measured, every thought distant. The radio crackled. All stations, hostage situation critical. Assault team ETA 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Morrison had 3, maybe less. She switched frequencies. "Ranger 6, this is Navy Overwatch. I have a shot." Brenner's voice came back strained. "Negative, Navy. That's impossible. Wait for the team." She didn't reply. Through the scope, the executioner began to speak. Arabic, loud for the camera. The kind of speech meant for propaganda. Her finger rested against the trigger guard. "They're going to kill him in the next 2 minutes, she said quietly. "Then he's already dead," Brenner snapped. "Do not take that shot." Her heartbeat slowed, 42 beats per minute. Her mother's voice echoed in memory. "Find the stillness between breaths. That's where truth hides." The safety clicked off. Wind 8 miles per hour, gusting 15. Temperature 67. Pressure 22.2 nhg. Elevation 8,000 feet. Physics didn't lie, people did. She exhaled half a breath. The world narrowed, reticle target purpose. The TAC-50 roared. Soundless for an instant, then thunder. Dust lifted around her, swirling in the recoil's wake. The bullet, a 750-grain handload, cut through the cold Afghan air. 3.7 seconds of nothingness. Then impact. The executioner dropped mid-sentence, chest erupting before the sound reached him. The knife clattered against the ground. The cameraman froze, then bolted. Guards screamed, diving for cover. Down below, Morrison rolled sideways, adrenaline giving him back control. He crawled behind a wall, alive, disoriented but alive. Arya didn't move, didn't celebrate, just logged the data. Range confirmed, 2,817 meters. Radio silence lasted a full minute. Then Brenner's voice, small, almost reverent. "Navy, what was the confirmed range on that shot?" 2817, she said. When the Rangers reached the compound half an hour later, there was no resistance, no fight. The Taliban had fled, convinced some invisible wrath had come from the mountains. Back at base, the silence in the debrief room wasn't about disbelief. It was about shame. Brenner spoke first. 11 years as a sniper, he said, voice quiet. "I've seen impossible shots, but that wasn't luck. That was applied physics under pressure, with a human life in the balance." He paused, looked at her, and added softly, "I was wrong." No applause followed, just silence, the kind that carries respect. Later that night, she sat alone outside the tent, cleaning the rifle in moonlight. Her hands moved slow, almost tender. Hawk brought her coffee. "You know they'll never print this," he said. "Doesn't matter," she replied. He studied her for a moment. "What does matter?" She looked out at the valley, empty now, peaceful in a way it never really was. "That someone gets to go home," she said. "That's enough." Somewhere across the world, a man named David Morrison would wake up beside his daughters and not know why he'd cried in his sleep. And the Rangers, every single one who'd mocked her, would carry that silence in their eyes whenever they saw another woman in uniform. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What made her so calm when everything was falling apart? It wasn't courage. It wasn't training. It was something colder, quieter, something born from years of being told she didn't belong. Arya Blackwood learned early that silence could be armor. The kind that didn't shine, didn't boast, didn't need to be seen. Because words were easy to shoot down, but performance was. After the mission in Coral Valley, her name vanished into classified reports. Overwatch Unit Alpha, redacted. No recognition. No medals. Just another line in the system that said, "Mission successful, 0 friendly casualties." But inside, something shifted. The Rangers' laughter had died that day, yet echoes of older voices still lived in her memory. She'd grown up in the sharp, open cold of Wyoming, where winters taught you that survival meant endurance. Her mother, Ellen Blackwood, was the kind of woman who never raised her voice. An Olympic biathlete, once favored to win gold until fate and a gust of wind stole it by 0.2 of a second. Arya was 9 when she watched her mother take that loss with a straight back and dry eyes. That night, she'd found her alone, cleaning the same rifle over and over. "You did everything right," Arya had whispered. Her mother smiled, not sadly, not bitterly, just truthfully. "Nobody remembers who almost won, sweetheart. They remember who delivered when it mattered." Those words followed her like a prayer and a curse. By 19, she'd joined the Navy, not to chase medals, to chase quiet purpose. At first, she'd enlisted as a corpsman, drawn to the idea of saving lives, not ending them. But during weapons qualification, the instructors noticed something uncanny. Her scores were perfect. Every range, every condition. It wasn't just skill, it was control. She could lower her heart rate at will, time her shots between beats, predict drift before the wind even changed. When naval special warfare began quietly opening selective support roles to women, her name rose to the top of the list. Selection was brutal, designed to break people who thought they wanted to be exceptional until they met the truth of it. There were no slogans, no speeches, just cold water, endless miles, and the constant reminder that nobody was rooting for you. During a night exercise in Coronado, one instructor made her crawl through tide flats with a 60-pound ruck. Every time she slowed, he leaned close and whispered, "You'll quit, you'll go home, they all do." But she didn't, not because she was tougher, but because she'd already learned the value of silence. She didn't need to argue with him, she just needed to keep moving. By dawn, she was the only one still crawling. That morning, when the instructor tossed her a cup of coffee instead of an insult, she realized something. Respect earned through silence lasts longer than any word. Years later, her reputation within naval special warfare wasn't loud. It was whispered, the ghost shot, the calm hand, the one who does miss. Her longest confirmed hit before Afghanistan was in Syria, 2,470 meters. She'd taken down a bomb maker seconds before he could detonate an IED convoy. That report was classified and sealed, the footage deleted, the existence of her mission denied. But she remembered every detail, the wind, the sand, the heartbeat. And the aftermath, her spotter bleeding out beside her, whispering his last words before she dragged him half a mile under fire. It wasn't glory that haunted her, it was survival. Surviving when others didn't. Delivering when it mattered, and then pretending it hadn't happened. Back at Bagram, 2 days after the Coral Valley shot, the base moved like a body that didn't know it had been cut. Soldiers walking with new respect, commanders looking at her a little too long. But Arya didn't care about looks. She cared about patterns, and something in her gut told her this mission wasn't over. She stood at the edge of the runway, the TAC-50 case beside her boots. Her co-commander Reeves approached quietly, a tablet in hand. "Nice work in Coral Valley, Chief," he said. "You saved a life, but you stirred the pot." She turned to face him, meaning JTF Raptor doesn't like the Navy taking the spotlight in a Ranger AO. And now, they're requesting your transfer to Joint Command Oversight. Her jaw tightened. "That's not a transfer, that's a benching." Reeves sighed. "You embarrassed the wrong people, Arya. Let it cool down." "I don't do this for recognition." "I know," he said, "but they do." He paused, then added quietly, "You've got a choice. You can fade out quietly or remind them why you're still here." Her eyes drifted back to the mountains. The sun was setting, the air painted gold and blood red. "Then send me back out," she said. That night sleep didn't come easy. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that compound, Morrison's face. The moment before she pulled the trigger, that impossible, suspended stillness. There's a strange guilt that comes with saving a life by taking one, a moral equation that never balances. She killed hundreds in her career, most at distances that blurred them into data, wind speed, elevation, humidity. But every once in a while one stayed. The man in Syria, the boy with the radio in Iraq, the executioner in Coral Valley. Different faces, same silence afterward. She got up before dawn, heading to the makeshift range behind the airfield. It was empty, just the way she liked it. The early light stretched across the ground like smoke. She unpacked the TAC-50, set up a steel plate target at 1,200 meters, and began the ritual she knew better than prayer. Breathe, align, squeeze. Repeat. Each shot echoed back through the valley like a heartbeat, the sound of distance collapsing. Between rounds, she remembered something her mother had told her before leaving for boot camp. "You'll be tempted to prove them wrong, Arya, but proving them wrong isn't the same as being right." She hadn't understood it then. She was starting to now. Maybe that's what made the Coral Valley shot hurt more than it healed, because the silence that followed wasn't triumph. It was isolation. Later that morning, as she cleaned her rifle, Hawk appeared again, this time holding an envelope. "From Morrison," he said, "came through official channels." Arya hesitated before taking it. The paper was rough, creased. Inside, a handwritten letter. "You gave me back to my daughters. There are no words sufficient." That was all, no rank, no details, just truth. She folded it carefully, slipped it into her notebook. "He shouldn't thank me," she said. "Why not?" Hawk asked. She looked at the rifle, the scarred steel and the precision it represented. "Because I don't do this for thanks. I do it so others can stop bleeding." He nodded slowly. "You ever think about stopping?" She smiled faintly. "Every day, but then I remember what happens when good people stop." When the next deployment orders came, they were stamped eyes only. A region she'd never worked before. A target profile she couldn't fully see yet. But deep down, she knew the shot in Coral Valley wasn't the end of her story. It was the start of something bigger, something darker. There were whispers in the Joint Command logs about an emerging cell, well-funded, strategic, hunting Western specialists. Rumors that one of them had already killed a sniper team in Helmand. And someone, somewhere, had decided Arya Blackwood was the only one precise enough to find them first. She packed her gear that night in silence. No ceremony, no goodbye. Before leaving, she stopped by the memorial wall in the hangar, names etched into black steel. Among them, her spotter from Syria. She touched his name gently, whispering, "Still moving, brother." Outside, the night wind rose again, carrying sand and memory across the base. She closed her eyes and listened to it, that endless Afghan wind that never forgot what it had seen. Somewhere in that sound was the truth she'd lived by. Respect isn't given, it's earned in the spaces where no one's watching. And sometimes, the quietest warrior in the room is the one who changes everything. What if the next trigger pull wasn't about saving someone, but stopping yourself? For most snipers, the hardest part of the job was the distance. For Aria Blackwood, it was the silence that came after. 3 weeks after the Coral Valley shot, she was reassigned under direct Joint Command oversight. An operation so classified the mission file came sealed inside a carbon envelope. The orders read simple. Location, Nuristan Province, Afghanistan. Objective, monitor and neutralize cell Ashar-9. Priority, high. Authorization, discretionary engagement permitted under Shadow Directive. Shadow Directive, 2 words that meant she'd be working without backup, no standard comms, no ranger support, no Hawk. Just her, a field signal kit, and a new spotter she didn't know. Her helicopter touched down on a barren ridge at dawn. The mountains here were different, sharper, older, carved in silence. The pilot didn't even kill the rotors. He just shouted over the noise. "You're off the books, Chief. Officially, you're not here." She jumped down, dust swirling around her boots. By the time she turned, the bird was already gone, shrinking into the horizon like it didn't want to remember she existed. Waiting for her at the outpost was Captain Elias Ward, Army Intelligence Liaison, tall, composed, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He didn't offer a handshake, just motioned toward a small tent lit by a single lamp. "You're the sniper," he said flatly. "You're the handler," she replied. A brief silence, mutual measurement. "I read your file," he continued. "Coral Valley, impressive." She smiled faintly. "Most of it's redacted." "That's why it's impressive." He handed her a folder. Inside were drone stills and intercepted radio transcripts. A pattern emerged, small, surgical hits on coalition teams. Each ambush precise, disciplined, guided by long-range fire. "These aren't random attacks," Ward said. "Someone out there's hunting us, and they're good." She studied one of the image's heat signatures along a ridgeline overlapping arcs of fire. The spacing was perfect, too perfect. "Whoever they are," she said quietly, "they know their craft." "You're not wrong," he replied. "Intel calls him Kafik, ex-Soviet trained, possibly Chechen lineage, runs Ashar-9. Rumor is he used to be one of ours." Her eyes lifted. "You mean American?" "Contractor, back when the lines blurred, before people like you cleaned them up." That detail sat heavy, because she'd met people like that, ghosts left over from wars that never officially ended, men who trained under flags and died without them. The operation plan was simple: find the sniper, observe, and if necessary, remove. But simple plans hide complicated truths. For 5 days, Aria and Ward moved through valleys and ridges, sleeping in shifts, eating in silence. She carried her TAC-50 and a suppressed MK-13 as backup. He carried a radio she wasn't sure worked. By the 6th morning, they found signs, empty casings, a flattened hide site overlooking a convoy route. Whoever this sniper was, he'd been here recently. She ran her hand over the ground. The soil still warm from sun, impressions sharp. Her instincts whispered what the data couldn't. He was still close, watching. "We're in his scope," she said softly. Ward froze. "Then why hasn't he fired?" "Because he wants to see who's come for him." That night Aria set her hide on the northern slope, wind in her face. Through her scope, the valley looked like a sleeping animal, still, dangerous. Ward manned the spotter's glass beside her, uneasy. "You always this quiet?" "Noise gives away position." "Even in life?" She didn't answer. The silence between them stretched until he finally muttered, "He's not going to show." "He will," she said. "People like him always come back to the same ridges. They trust them, the way I trust mine." "How do you know that?" She exhaled slowly, eyes still on the scope. "Because it's what I do." At 2:40 hours, movement flickered in the glass. A shape, low, deliberate, crawling across the opposite slope. She locked her reticle. The target was nearly 2,300 meters out. Profile slim, efficient. The kind of crawl only professionals used. "Got him," she whispered. Ward leaned closer. "Can you confirm?" "Not yet. Wait for moonlight." The clouds shifted just enough. And then, for one impossible moment, she saw his face through the scope. Gray beard, calm eyes, expression not of fear but recognition. Her heart stuttered, because she knew that face. Sergei Kirilenko, ex-Spetsnaz instructor, the man who trained her during an exchange program in Poland years ago, the man who taught her wind reading, bullet drift, and the cold mathematics of death. He was supposed to be dead. Ward noticed her hesitation. "What is it? Do you have a shot?" She didn't answer. Her finger rested against the trigger guard. Through her scope, Sergei turned as if he knew she was watching. He didn't aim, didn't run. He just nodded. "He sees us," she whispered. "Then take him down," Ward hissed. But she couldn't, not yet. Because there was something in that nod, a silent message she couldn't decode. The next morning, their radio picked up a short transmission on a dead frequency. Just 4 words. "Stop following, too late." Ward replayed it twice. "It's him, he's baiting us." But Arya heard something else: fatigue, regret, the same tone she'd heard in her mother's voice when talking about missed shots. "No," she said quietly, "he's warning us." About what? She didn't know, but every instinct screamed that this wasn't just a cat-and-mouse hunt. It was a setup. At 1100 hours, they moved again, toward a ruined watchtower marked on the map as Point Raven. From there, they'd get line of sight into the valley network that fed Ashar 9 logistics trail. As they climbed, she noticed small things too small for most eyes. Tripwires reset, stones disturbed. "Ward," she said softly, "this ridge is hot." He frowned. "You mean mined?" "Worse, it's layered." She pointed, almost invisible. A fine thread stretched between 2 rocks. "He's not trying to kill us with it," she murmured. "He's tracking us." "How the hell?" Before he could finish, the valley below erupted in distant fire. Echoes rolled through the mountains like thunder. A coalition convoy, ambushed. Ward's radio crackled with chaos, voices shouting, coordinates panic. "That's Alpha Convoy," he barked. "They were rerouted this morning." "He knew," Arya said, realization dawning. "He used us to draw attention away." She scanned through the scope again, locking onto muzzle flashes miles away. The shooter was Sergei. The spacing was off, the rhythm chaotic. Someone else was pulling the trigger. She found him, a young fighter on the ridgeline, untrained, jerking with adrenaline. But behind him, in shadow, another figure watching, commanding. "Kafik," she whispered. Ward looked through his binoculars. "That's him." "Yes." "Then take the shot." She didn't answer. Her reticle steadied, the distance marker climbing 2,950 meters. Wind erratic, heat shimmer thick. It wasn't an impossible shot, but something in her gut resisted. Because if Kafik was here, then where was Sergei? A sudden glint to her right. She pivoted, fast glass catching light, the shimmer of a scope aimed directly at them. Her breath froze. Counter-sniper, 1 o'clock high. Ward dove for cover. The first round struck the stone beside her, shattering it into dust. She rolled behind the rock, chambering a round in reflex. The second shot came closer, whispering past her cheek, so close she felt the air peel skin. He's zeroing in, Ward shouted. No, she murmured, heart steadying. He's not missing. What are you talking about? He's warning me. Ward stared at her like she'd gone insane. But Arya knew. Those weren't kill shots, they were signals. 3 rounds, precise spacing, left, right, high. The same pattern Sergei had taught her years ago, the hold fire code. Which meant she wasn't supposed to shoot, not yet. When the firing stopped, the mountain fell into silence again. Dust hung in the air like a ghost refusing to leave. Ward crawled over, eyes wide. You want to explain what the hell that was? She exhaled. That was him, Sergei. Then why didn't he kill us? She looked back through the scope, the opposite ridge empty now. Because he's not the enemy. Then who is? She turned toward the convoy below, smoke rising, black against the sun. Whoever sent it there. That night she couldn't sleep. The sky was too clear, the stars too sharp. She replayed every frame in her mind, Sergei's face, the pattern, the radio message. Something about this mission didn't add up. If Kafik was real, then why were their intercepts weeks old? Why was there no drone coverage, no satellite track? And why assign her to a sniper hunt when the real threat moved like a shadow of bureaucracy? She realized, for the first time, she might not be hunting a target. She might be the target. In the darkness, she whispered to herself. You don't cross the line they draw for you, you redraw it. And as the mountain wind moved through the empty valley, Arya knew the next shot she took wouldn't just test her skill. It would test her soul. What if the mission you trusted was built to bury you? The mountain was silent, but her mind was. Every breath she took seemed to echo with questions that didn't have answers. Why had command sent her here alone? Why the vague intel? And why, of all people, was Sergei Kirilenko, her old mentor, standing on the opposite ridge, signaling her to stop? It wasn't coincidence, it was choreography. And she had just danced right into it. By dawn, the smoke from the ambushed convoy had thinned to gray threads across the valley. The air smelled of diesel and dust. Arya lay prone on the ridgeline, scanning the wreckage through her scope. No survivors, no comms chatter, just silence, that heavy, sterile kind of silence that follows something deliberate. Ward knelt beside her, voice low but sharp. That convoy wasn't supposed to be there. I saw the movement orders myself. You saw what they wanted you to see, she murmured. He frowned. You think command set this up? She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said enough. If that's true, he pressed, why involve us, why bring you here? She blinked once, slow. Because they needed a scapegoat, someone they could bury under classified ink if it went wrong. The wind shifted, her voice dropped to a whisper. And it just went wrong. Hours later they broke position, hiking toward a secondary extraction point. Their boots crunched over shale, each step an argument with gravity. Ward tried to lighten the mood. You really think your mentor, out here saving you? She gave a faint, humorless smile. Sergei didn't save people, he prepared them. For what? For betrayal. He let that hang in the air. By mid-afternoon, they reached a narrow pass lined with crumbling stone. Ward set up the sat phone, trying to punch through interference. Arya crouched beside him, scanning the ridges. No movement, no birds, no life. That was wrong, too still. Her instincts tensed a second before the first explosion hit. The ground lifted, a concussive wave throwing them into the dirt. Rocks rained down. The second blast came from the east, closer. They walked straight into a coordinated strike zone. Move, she shouted, dragging Ward behind an outcrop as shrapnel sliced the air. The radio flared, distorted, encrypted. A voice cut through, mechanical and cold. Shadow unit confirmed. Proceed with elimination. No survivors. Ward's face went pale. That's our frequency. She didn't hesitate. grabbed her pack, her rifle. "We're compromised." "By who?" She looked him dead in the eye. "By everyone." They ran, two specks against the vast brutality of the Afghan highlands. Behind them, mortars fell like punctuation marks to a sentence she hadn't written. Ward stumbled, half carrying the sat phone, half dragging himself up rock slick with dust. "This is insane," he gasped. "They're calling air assets on their own people." "Not people," she said flatly. "Liabilities. You think we're disposable always." They took shelter in an abandoned shepherd's hut carved into the side of a slope. The roof was half gone, walls scorched from some forgotten war. Inside, the air was thick with silence and fear. Ward slammed the sat phone on the floor. "Signal's dead. They're jamming the band." "Good," she said. "Means they want to control the narrative." "What narrative?" "That we died in a friendly fire accident. Neat, tragic, clean." Ward paced, shaking his head. "Why would they do this? We're on the same side." She gave him a look that cut through every illusion he still carried. "You still believe sides exist out here?" As night fell, the temperature plummeted. Arya sat by the broken window, rifle across her knees, eyes scanning the darkness. Ward sat near the corner, arms wrapped around himself. "What happens now?" "We survive. And after that, then we find out who wrote the order." "You can't fight command chief." She looked out into the black valley, voice a whisper. "Watch me." Around midnight, movement flickered near the ridge line, a faint shape against the stars. Not hostile, not cautious either, purposeful. Through her scope she saw him again, Sergei. He stood exposed on the ridge, rifle slung across his chest, one hand raised. A signal, simple, direct, "Follow me." "Ward," she said quietly, "we're moving." "You trust him?" "No, but I trust that he knows why we're still alive." They climbed under moonlight, breath steaming in the cold. Every sound a stone turning, a whisper of wind felt magnified. When they reached the crest, Sergei was waiting beside a small fire, its light flickering against the old lines of his face. He hadn't changed much, still broad, still deliberate, but his eyes, those one-size blue eyes, were darker now. "You shouldn't have come," he said in a thick Russian accent. "You shouldn't have aimed at me," she replied. A faint smile tugged his mouth. "If I wanted you dead, Arya, you would be." "Try me." Ward cut in, impatient. "Can we skip the reunion and maybe not die tonight?" Sergei's gaze drifted toward him, calm, assessing. "You brought a talker." "I brought the only person who didn't try to kill me today." "Then he'll do." They sat around the fire, a circle of half-trust and too much history. Sergei stirred the embers with a stick. "A Shar 9 isn't who you think they are," he said finally. "Enlighten me," Arya said. "They were built, not born, same as you. Shadow units, deniable assets used by multiple nations. When the politics changed, command shut them down. But ghosts don't die easy." "You're saying the people I'm hunting were trained by the same people who trained you." The words hit like recoil. "So why the ambush?" she asked. Sergei looked at her, not unkindly, but with the weight of someone who'd carried too many graves. "Because someone up top needed a war without fingerprints. They used your name, your success. Coral Valley made you a myth, and myths make perfect cover stories." "Cover for what?" "For operations that shouldn't exist." Ward swore under his breath. "They're going to blame this on you." "Already have," Sergei said. "Satellite footage shows your position near the blast radius. Reports filed. You'll be ghosts by morning." Arya stared into the fire, her jaw tightening. "Then I guess it's time to stop being ghosts." They broke camp before dawn. Sergei guided them through canyons that weren't on any map, old Soviet smuggler routes, carved by decades of forgotten wars. Every step down that path felt like descending into something deeper than enemy territory, like walking into the truth itself. Halfway through the gorge, Ward asked what had been sitting in all their minds. "Why help us? You could have just walked away." Sergei didn't stop walking. "Because once, a long time ago, I trained a woman who shot straighter than any man I ever met. I told her that someday the people she trusted most would make her choose between her soul and her orders." He looked back at her, eyes steady. "I was right." By mid-morning, they reached a hidden bunker buried in rock. Inside, cold concrete, flickering lights, and walls lined with abandoned comms gear. Sergei powered up an old terminal. The screen hummed to life, revealing encrypted files marked with an old classification tag, Operation Driftline. He glanced at Arya. This is what they were covering up. She stepped closer. The first document opened mission records, personnel files, deleted entries, names she recognized, others she didn't. Then she saw it. Blackwood Arya CPO designation, deniable asset 47. Status expendable. Her chest went still. Ward whispered, "They wrote you off before the mission even started." Sergei closed the file. "Now you understand." She turned toward him. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to know the only way out of the program is through it." "Through it." "Expose them or die trying." That night, as the three of them prepared to move again, Arya sat alone near the entrance. Her rifle rested beside her. The desert stars burned white above. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a soldier. She felt like evidence. And in that hollow realization, she found something strange, not despair but clarity. "They built me to be silent," she whispered, "to obey, to disappear." She looked toward the horizon, voice almost prayer-like. "But silence isn't loyalty, it's consent." And for the first time since Coral Valley, Arya Blackwood decided she would not be silent anymore. What happens when the people you trust start lying in the same way your enemies do? The bunker was colder the second night, not because of the air, but because of the truth it held. The old fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering like a pulse trying to stop itself. Arya Blackwood sat against the wall, eyes fixed on the flicker. Every time the light went dark, she saw the file again, her own name, her own erasure. Status expendable. She'd been called a lot of things in her career: sniper, operative, hero, ghost, but never expendable. That word was colder than the rifle barrel she'd carried across continents. Sergei and Ward argued in low voices near the terminal. She didn't join in. She just listened the way she'd always done. "We can't move this data without a link to command," Ward said. "If we can prove Driftline's real, we have to show it to someone in authority." "Authority," Sergei laughed, the sound rough like gravel. "Authority is who built it. You think the same men who buried this program will resurrect it for your conscience?" "We can't just sit here," Ward snapped. "If we don't act, they'll come for us." "They already have." Arya stood, finally speaking. Her voice was calm, too calm. "He's right. We're not fighting soldiers anymore. We're fighting signatures on a file." Ward turned toward her, frustration etched across his face. "Then what do you suggest, Chief? We hide forever?" "No, we survive long enough to turn this against them." By dawn, they had a plan, risky, desperate, but the only one that made sense. Sergei would use the old Soviet network lines buried beneath the bunker to route driftline data through dead satellites, bouncing the signal until it reached an Allied relay in Turkey. Once there, a failsafe would auto-transmit to multiple international defense channels. It was a digital suicide note. If it worked, it would expose the program. If it failed, it would lead every drone and kill team straight to them. Ward called it insanity. Arya called it balance. She'd spent her life believing in precision, in physics, in math, in predictable outcomes. But now she was learning that the human equation had no constants. Sergei worked for hours, his hands steady, movements deliberate. He typed in old Russian shorthand, humming under his breath, a tune Arya remembered from years ago. Something about it felt almost gentle, nostalgic, which made the moment crueler. Ward checked the perimeter, then sat beside Arya, his voice low. "You trust him?" She didn't look up. "No, but trust isn't a requirement for survival." He frowned. "So what's the plan when he turns on us?" "Same as when Command did." Ward studied her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "You talk like someone who's already dead." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." When Sergei finally leaned back from the terminal, the hum of the generator filled the silence. "It's ready," he said, "but the system needs one more authentication key, military clearance. The kind only someone active would have." All eyes turned to Ward. He hesitated. "You're saying my key? Your rank, your signal? If I log in with my credentials, Command will see my location immediately." "Yes," Sergei said, "they will, that's the point." Ward blinked. "You're setting a beacon." Sergei's tone was flat. "We need a distraction. The moment they trace you, they'll send an aerial strike team here. By then, the data will already be in orbit. You're using me as bait." "You offered to help," Sergei said simply. Ward turned to Arya, anger rising. "You knew about this." She shook her head. "No, but it makes sense." "Sense?" he spat. "You want me to die to protect data that might not even transmit." "People have died for less," she said quietly. The words landed like a slap. For a moment the air went still. Ward's hand hovered near his sidearm. Sergei didn't flinch. Arya watched both, calm, unreadable, calculating the space between violence and restraint. "You want to walk," Sergei said. "Walk, but if you stay, you do it knowing there's no clean end to this." Ward hesitated, his breath uneven. "You two are insane." Arya met his eyes. "We're just awake." He stayed. Because deep down, even the idealists want to see the truth burn. They executed the plan just before dawn. The code transmitted in fragments, each one leaping between decaying satellite systems like sparks in a storm. For 22 minutes everything worked, then static. The terminal beeped once, then again. "Signal loss," Sergei said grimly. "They're blocking uplinks." Arya leaned closer. "How long until they find us?" "They already have." The first drone passed overhead 5 minutes later, a low mechanical hum that vibrated through the rock. Ward gripped his rifle, eyes wide. "We have to move." "Move where?" Sergei asked. "We're already marked." Arya stood, slinging her TAC-50. Her voice was calm, clinical. "Then we make our own mark." She checked her rangefinder, wind gauge, elevation angle. Everything she needed was muscle memory. "They'll send ground units to confirm the kill," she said. "We can use that window to slip the data through secondary relay." "We won't survive that," Ward said. "Maybe not, but the truth will." Sergei smiled faintly, still quoting your mother. "Always." The bombardment came in waves, concussive blasts that tore chunks from the canyon walls. Dust turned the air into fog. Arya moved through it like she'd been born there, low and fast, finding cover between strikes. The rifle on her back felt like part of her skeleton, an extension of will. Ward and Sergei followed, ducking behind a rusted vehicle hull. "You think the transmission's still running?" Ward shouted. "Only one way to find out," Sergei yelled back. He sprinted toward the terminal room, vanishing into the smoke. Seconds later, the explosion stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. "That's not good," Arya whispered. She motioned for Ward to stay put and slipped inside. The bunker was half collapsed. Fire flickered across the walls. Sergei was still at the console, wounded, bleeding from a shrapnel cut across his temple. "Did it send?" she asked. He nodded weakly. "Partial upload, enough to make them nervous." "And you?" He smiled, a faint human thing. "I've been nervous for years." Before she could reply, Ward entered, gun raised. "Step away from him." Arya froze. "Ward, what are you doing?" "He's the leak. He set us up." "You don't know that." "Don't I?" He knew about the uplinks. He knew the response time. He wanted us pinned here. Sergei coughed, voice raw. "You think I'm working for them. I'm the reason you're still breathing." "You're the reason they found us," Ward shouted. The gun trembled in his hands. Fear, not anger. Arya stepped between them, voice low. "Put it down, Lieutenant, now." "He's playing you, Chief. You can't see it, can you? The old mentor act, the noble traitor, it's a script. You're part of it too, maybe." "You're losing it." "No," he said, eyes wild. "I'm seeing clearly for the first time. None of this makes sense. None of it's real." The shot came before she could speak. One round, close range. Sergei staggered back, eyes widening in disbelief. A red bloom spread across his chest. He didn't fall right away. He just looked at Arya, not angry, not surprised. Almost relieved. "Told you," he whispered, "the people you trust." Then he dropped. Ward's breathing turned ragged. The gun slipped from his hand. I just..." Arya stared at Sergei's body, then back at Ward. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You broke the equation." "He was going to." "You don't shoot the man who built your map when you're still lost." He backed away, shaking. "You don't understand, they'll come for us. We have to go." She didn't answer. She just reached down, closed Sergei's eyes, and whispered something he couldn't hear. When she stood again, there was no anger in her expression, just the cold steadiness of purpose. "You're right, Lieutenant," she said softly. "They'll come for us." She picked up her rifle. "Let's make sure they regret it." They left the bunker before dawn. Behind them, the mountain burned smoke rising into a blood-orange sky. Ward didn't speak. He didn't look at her. He just followed. As they descended through the canyon, Arya finally said, "He wasn't lying." "You can't know that." "I can, because he didn't beg." Ward said nothing. She glanced back once, the wind catching her hair, the horizon brightening. Somewhere far above, she imagined Sergei's voice, the one from years ago, teaching her how to breathe between beats. She whispered to the empty air, "You prepared me for betrayal. You just never told me it would come from both sides." That night, as they set camp miles from the ruins, Ward stared at the fire. His voice was a thread. "You think the world needs to know." "The world never listens until it bleeds," she said. "And us. We're already ghosts." In the quiet that followed, Arya reached into her pack and pulled out the encrypted drive Sergei had used. The small light still blinked, faint, alive. She smiled. "Looks like you didn't die for nothing, old man." The firelight caught her face, calm, resolute, haunted. And as the night wind moved through the canyons, it carried with it a truth she could finally name. Sometimes survival isn't about living through it. It's about refusing to disappear. How long can a soldier keep running before she becomes what she's running from? By the time the sun climbed over the ridgeline, Arya Blackwood and Elias Ward were already miles from the bunker. Behind them, the mountain still burned, a slow, dying wound against the sky. Each step away from it felt heavier, not lighter, like the mountain wasn't letting them go, only loaning them time. The desert changed as they moved east, color bleeding from tan to gray. The soil cracked like an old scar. Ward limped from shrapnel still buried in his thigh. He stopped complaining hours ago. Arya didn't speak much either. She carried Sergei's encrypted drive in a waterproof pouch pressed against her chest. Every few minutes she'd reach up, tap it once, as if making sure the truth still had a pulse. The radio in Ward's pack occasionally caught fragments, distorted transmissions, fragments of familiar words. Asset drift, contact lost, search and confirm. It was them. Command was still hunting. By midday, the air shimmered with heat. Arya signaled for a break under the ruins of an old shepherd's shelter. The walls leaned inward, full of bullet holes and history. Ward collapsed against the wall, pulling a field dressing from his pocket. "You know," he said between breaths, "you're the only person I've ever met who makes betrayal sound tactical." She didn't look up. "If you see it coming, it's not betrayal, it's just timing." He laughed drily. "You really believe that?" She met his eyes, calm, unwavering. "I have to." He studied her for a moment. "So what's next, Chief? You keep running until what? Until someone writes you back into existence." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the heat made the ground dance. "No," she said softly. "I keep running until they can't bury me again." As night fell, they reached a dried riverbed. Arya set up camp with quiet efficiency, no fire, no light, just routine. Ward watched her move. She seemed untouched by fatigue, as if her discipline had replaced her blood. "You ever stop?" he asked. "You mean rest?" "I mean feel." She froze mid-motion, then looked at him, not angry but distant. "Feeling gets people killed." "Maybe that's why you're still alive," he said softly, "because you stopped." She turned back to her gear, pretending she hadn't heard. But in the dark, his words followed her like echoes she couldn't shake. Sometime after midnight, she woke suddenly. No noise, no movement, just instinct. She scanned the ridge through her scope, nothing but shadows. But something in the silence felt wrong. She nudged Ward awake, gesturing for quiet. He froze, following her gaze. Then they both saw it, faint glints across the valley floor. "Tripods," she whispered, "thermal optics." Ward's jaw clenched. "They found us." Arya exhaled slowly, lowering the scope. "No," she said, "they're not shooting." "Why?" "Because they're watching." For hours, the lasers moved like red veins across the sand, tracking, circling, but never closing in. It was psychological warfare, the kind that made you second-guess your own heartbeat. By dawn, they were gone. No shots, no pursuit, just footprints in the dust leading nowhere. Ward sat with his head in his hands. "They could have killed us 10 times over. Why didn't they?" Arya's voice was a whisper. "Because they're not after us anymore. They're after the story." "What story?" "The one they're writing while we're still breathing." 2 days later, they found the village. Or what was left of it. A cluster of shattered clay homes at the base of a ridge, abandoned years ago, except for the goats that wandered like ghosts. Arya decided to rest there, at least long enough to rehydrate, recalibrate, and find a way to transmit the data Sergei had died for. She climbed into the tallest structure, a broken minaret, and set up her scope facing north. From up there, the valley stretched endless. It was beautiful, in the kind of way only war ruins can be: silent, tragic, enduring. Ward scavenged for food and supplies, returning with a radio battery and a look she didn't like. "We've got company," he said. "How many?" 3, maybe 4. Local militia by the look of them. Could be Taliban remnants, could be mercs. "Mercs," she repeated quietly. He nodded. "They've got new gear, satellite comms, someone's paying them well." Her expression didn't change, but her mind was already moving. If they were mercenaries, that meant command wasn't just trying to erase her quietly. They'd outsourced the cleanup. They came at dusk, 4 silhouettes moving through the ruins, careful, trained. Arya lay prone on the roof, scope aligned, wind steady. Her finger rested on the trigger, but her mind was elsewhere, caught in that fragile pause between necessity and exhaustion. She didn't want to kill them. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because she was tired of being the hand that delivered other people's silence. "Chief," Ward's voice crackled in her earpiece, "you got eyes. I see them. Then take the shot." She hesitated. Below, the men advanced slowly. One carried a satlink, another a suppressed rifle, professionals. They were talking calm, unaware they were seconds from death. She could read lips well enough to catch fragments. Asset confirmed, orders priority 1. That word, asset. It made her stomach turn. The first man reached the edge of the courtyard. She exhaled, adjusted her hold, and fired. The shot echoed through the valley, loud enough to feel like thunder. The man dropped instantly. The others scattered, returning fire blindly, rounds cracking against the walls below. Ward moved up beside her, returning fire with short bursts. Dust rose like smoke. One merc tried to flank from the west. Arya shifted, fired again, missed by inches, adjusted, fired once more. Silence. The fight lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, the world was quiet again, except for the ringing in their ears and the weight in her chest. Ward approached the bodies cautiously, one still breathed, coughing blood. Arya joined him, kneeling beside the wounded man. His eyes were glazed with fear. His accent wasn't local, British. "Who sent you?" she asked. He coughed, smiled weakly. "You did." Then he died. For a long moment she didn't move, didn't speak. Ward crouched beside her, whispering. "What did he mean?" She looked down at the dead man, at the neat insignia on his vest. Private Security Division, Joint Command Contract. Her voice broke the silence, low and hollow. "It means command, still paying for my disappearance." "They're burning their own trail," Ward said softly. "And we're standing on it." That night she didn't sleep. She just sat on the roof, watching the stars burn holes through the dark. Somewhere far above, a satellite still orbited with Sergei's partial upload, fragments of driftline, still alive in the digital void. She wondered if that was what survival meant now. Just fragments of truth scattered far enough apart that no one could ever erase them all. Ward joined her quietly, sitting a few feet away. His voice was tired. "You could have let them take us, would have been easier." "Easier isn't the same as right." "And right got Sergei killed." "No," she said softly, "lies did." He sighed, shaking his head. "You still believe in right and wrong, huh?" She looked at him, eyes distant but sure. "No, I believe in consequence." At dawn, they buried the bodies, 4 shallow graves in the sand. She placed one of the merc's dog tags in her pocket, not as a trophy, but as evidence. When she stood, she looked at Ward. "We can't keep running. Every direction leads back to command." "Then what?" "We go through them." "You're talking suicide." "No, I'm talking symmetry." That day, Arya made contact with a voice she hadn't heard in years, a comms tech from her Navy days. She used an old frequency, encoded with one of Sergei's encryption keys. Static filled the air for almost a full minute. Then a familiar voice came through, weary and disbelieving. "Chief Blackwood, Jesus, we thought you were gone." "Almost," she said. "I need a secure line to Fleetcom Archive, priority transmission." "That's restricted." "Not more restricted than the truth you're sitting on," she cut in. "Patch me through, or I'll assume you're already compromised." There was silence, then the line clicked open. "You've got 5 minutes, Chief." "I only need 3. As she sent the first burst of data, her hands didn't tremble, not once. Sergei's partial upload, the driftline documents, the mission logs, every hidden line they'd tried to erase. For the first time in weeks, she felt purpose again, not survival, not vengeance, just clarity. When the upload completed, she whispered, "Now it's their turn to feel hunted." Ward watched from the doorway. "You think this will change anything?" She looked up at him, her voice calm, almost peaceful. Maybe not the system, but it'll change the story. And what about us? We were never part of the story. As the morning sun rose, painting the desert in firelight, Arya adjusted the rifle strap on her shoulder. "Where to now?" Ward asked. "Wherever the silence is." They walked into the heat without looking back. The wind picked up, scattering dust across the graves they'd left behind. And in that wind she heard it again, her mother's voice, soft and steady. "Nobody remembers who almost won. They remember who delivered when it mattered." Arya didn't smile, didn't cry. She just kept walking. Because sometimes survival isn't victory. It's unfinished justice. What happens when the truth you fought to reveal becomes the weapon they use to destroy you? The message went out at dawn. And by noon, the world was already bleeding from it. Within 6 hours of Arya Blackwood's transmission, encrypted documents began surfacing across black channels and foreign news outlets. Fragments of Operation Driftline, deniable assassinations, falsified airstrikes, fabricated intelligence. Names, coordinates, ghost missions that weren't supposed to exist. Governments called it misinformation. Command called it treason. And somewhere in a dark conference room, men in expensive suits said her name like a curse. "Find her, end it quietly." Arya knew the silence wouldn't last. They left the village the same night. The air smelled of dust and static, the kind that comes before a storm. Ward walked beside her, his limp worse now, his face drawn. Neither spoke, there was nothing left to say. They crossed a line no soldier comes back from. The radio on Ward's pack occasionally hissed with life, fragments of broadcasts in English, Russian, Arabic. Everyone wanted the same thing. The woman with the rifle who'd burned the veil. Chief Arya Blackwood, wanted for espionage and disclosure of classified material. Believed responsible for unauthorized release of sensitive operations. Armed and extremely dangerous. Each new report sounded less like truth and more like prophecy. The myth was building, and she was trapped inside it. By the time they reached the high plateau near the Pakistan border, Arya had stopped counting the days. Survival was no longer a mission, it was momentum. Ward had started to change too. He still followed her lead, but the weight of guilt was carving him hollow. She'd seen that look before in teammates, in enemies, in mirrors. He asked one night, voice small, "Do you ever wonder if we went too far?" She looked at the stars, her tone flat. "The truth doesn't go far enough." "But what if the truth kills people who didn't deserve it?" She turned her head toward him, eyes cold but kind. "It already did, that's why it mattered." A few days later, they made camp inside the skeletal remains of an old radar station. Rusting towers loomed above like gravestones. The wind moaned through the hollow beams. Arya spread out a faded map on the floor. "We can't go north, too many checkpoints. If we move east, the terrain's open. We'll be exposed." "Then west," Ward offered. "Into Iran. Not unless you want to trade one hunter for another." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "So we just stay ghosts forever." She folded the map carefully. "No, ghosts fade, I intend to haunt." That night she connected her field laptop to a scavenged SAT relay and checked the data logs. Driftline had spread faster than expected, multiple leaks confirmed. But something else caught her attention, a new file uploaded under her name. She opened it. Inside was a photograph. Her in Coral Valley, behind her scope mid-shot. The caption read, "Chief Petty Officer Arya Blackwood, responsible for unauthorized killing of non-combatant during covert operation." A smear, a digital execution. She felt it in her chest, not anger, not fear, just betrayal's old, familiar chill. Ward leaned over her shoulder, reading the text. "They're rewriting you." She shut the laptop. They're trying to control the story. Then what now? We write a better one. But the hunt was tightening. Satellite sweeps, intercepted comms, drone patrols over civilian routes. And then, on the third night, she heard the sound she'd been dreading, the low, mechanical whine of a reaper overhead. Ward froze. They found us. No, she said softly, watching the sky. They never lost us. The drone passed once, then twice, then the mountain lit up. The first missile hit 200 meters away, close enough to throw them off their feet. The second hit the ridge, sending a shower of stone and fire. Arya grabbed the drive, the rifle, the essentials. Move! They ran down the slope across the scree, lungs burning, world shaking. Behind them, the mountain came apart. Hours later, when the smoke finally thinned, they found shelter in a ravine. Ward collapsed, coughing blood from the shockwave. She tore open his vest, checked for fractures. I'm fine, he rasped. You're not. Doesn't matter, they'll send another bird. We're dead either way. She pressed gauze against his chest. Not yet. You can't save both of us. She looked at him, then really looked, and for the first time in weeks her voice cracked. Don't tell me who I can save. He laughed weakly, still giving orders, Chief. Always. By the time dawn came, Ward was unconscious but alive. Arya sat beside him, rifle across her knees, watching the sunrise through smoke. Her mind wandered to Sergei, to Coral Valley, to the faces of every person she'd ever aimed at. And then to her mother. She remembered the night before boot camp, the kitchen light, the smell of gun oil and coffee. You'll have to be better than perfect, her mother had said. Not because they doubt your skill, because they'll doubt your place. And what if I fail? Then you stand anyway. The world only sees what doesn't fall. Now, watching the sun rise over a country that had forgotten its own wars, Arya whispered to no one. I'm still standing, Mom. Ward woke at midday, pale and shaking. Where are we? Far enough, she said, for now. You think anyone out there believes you? Belief isn't the point, she replied. Proof is. He smiled weakly. Proof doesn't change anything. It changes the silence. 2 days later, they crossed into a narrow border valley, unmarked, unguarded. A smuggler trail. Arya carried Ward's weight half the way. His breath came shallow, every step a question his body might not answer. At dusk, they reached a cave above the ridgeline. She laid him down gently. Rest, she said, I'll keep watch. He grabbed her wrist before she stood. Arya, he whispered, if we don't make it, you should know something. She froze. Don't. No, you need to hear it. He coughed, his voice breaking. When I joined this op, they told me if it went wrong, my orders were to confirm your termination. Her expression didn't change, only her eyes did. And you did. I tried, he said, at first, but then I saw who they were really afraid of. She looked down at him, her tone quiet, almost kind. You broke the chain. No, he said softly. You did, I just followed. Later that night, as the wind howled through the cave, she found herself whispering to the dark. They'll never stop, will they? Ward stirred, half asleep. No, he murmured, but maybe someone will start asking why. She smiled faintly. Then maybe it's worth it. At dawn, movement in the valley below. Dust trails, convoy lights. She raised her scope. Black vehicles, no flags, unmarked. Command's final answer. She counted 12, maybe more. Ward, she whispered, wake up. He opened his eyes, tried to sit. They're here. Yeah. Then this is it. No, she said, chambering around. This is proof. The first shot cracked through the morning. Then another. Then silence. Each pull of the trigger was deliberate, Not rage, not vengeance, just resolve. She was beyond emotion now, operating in that rare, still space where instinct and clarity meet. Ward fired beside her, his breathing labored. Their world became rhythm: shoot, shift, reload, repeat. But for every one they dropped, two more came. The valley erupted in fire and dust. She reloaded again, the magazine clattering to the ground. Her hands were steady, eyes sharp, mind clear. Ward moved too. No answer. She turned. He was slumped against the rock, eyes open but gone. For a second the war stopped. Everything went quiet. Even the wind. She reached out, touched his shoulder gently, then closed his eyes. "Rest easy, Lieutenant," she whispered. "You finished your mission." When the dust cleared, she was alone. The convoy was gone. The air reeked of cordite and metal. She packed her gear, took one last look at the horizon, and whispered to the wind, "You can erase the name, but not the truth." Then she walked. Through ash, through silence, through every unseen line she'd already crossed. By the time night fell, she was miles away. The stars were sharp and merciless above. She found a ridge, set her rifle down, and sat with her back against the earth. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the weight of loss, of duty, of truth. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Sometimes I think we fight not to win, but to remember why we started." And for once, the silence didn't feel like her enemy. It felt like understanding. How do you bury ghosts that still have your heartbeat? Dawn broke over a land without borders. The mountains looked softer from a distance, as if they'd finally run out of sharp edges. Arya Blackwood moved through them one last time, a shadow against gold light, her pack lighter than it had ever been. The rifle, the drive, the photographs, the evidence of a life that no longer existed. She hadn't spoken in 2 days. There was no one left to speak to. Ward was gone. Sergei was gone. Command had erased her from every roster, every file, every history, yet she was still breathing. Sometimes that's the cruelest defiance. Down in the valley below, she saw a convoy of journalists at a checkpoint, civilians, filming ruins, chasing headlines about the mystery sniper who exposed Driftline. They didn't know her face. They never would. But the story they were telling was hers, twisted, fragmented, alive in ways truth rarely survives. She watched them a long time unseen, then turned away. "Let them find their own ending," she murmured. Because the truth wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to whoever still believed in it. She reached the outskirts of an abandoned airfield by noon. Rusted hangars, torn flags, a world that had outlived its usefulness. Inside one hangar, sunlight poured through holes in the roof, scattering across the concrete like falling glass. She laid the TAC-50 on the ground. The same weapon that had saved a hostage, betrayed a command, and defined her name. Its barrel scarred, its scope cracked at the corner. It looked tired, too. She knelt beside it, ran her hand across the metal. "You and me," she whispered. "We did what they said couldn't be done." Then she dismantled it piece by piece, bolt, barrel, stock. Every sound echoed through the empty hangar, like the closing of a chapter. When she was done, she buried the parts beneath the floorboards, sealing them under dust. A grave for a machine that had never missed. That night she built a small fire outside the hangar and burned her remaining gear. The uniform patches, the encrypted codes, even the letter from Morrison, "You gave me back to my daughters." She read it once more before letting it fall into the flame. The edges curled, the words turned to ember. "You lived," she said quietly. "That's all that matters." For the first time in months, she slept without dreaming. When morning came, she woke to the sound of a rotor in the distance, faint but growing. A helicopter, small, civilian, moving low through the valley. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She just stood there, wind tugging at her hair, watching it approach. The chopper landed 50 yards away. A man stepped out unarmed, dressed in desert tan, camera on his shoulder. Journalist. He raised a hand, cautious but not afraid. You're her, aren't you? The sniper, the leak. Arya said nothing. The wind answered for her. The world's trying to decide what you are, he continued. Hero, traitor, myth, I just want to hear it from you. She studied him, a stranger looking for meaning in someone else's wreckage. Why? She asked finally. Because people need to know why you did it. She looked past him toward the horizon. If they didn't believe the evidence, they won't believe the words. Maybe they will if you speak them. She shook her head slowly. They've heard enough words. None of them ever stopped a war. He hesitated. Then what should I tell them? She thought for a long time, then said quietly, tell them I was tired of silence. The journalist lowered the camera. His eyes softened. That's not much of a statement. It's the only one that matters. He left a few minutes later. She didn't watch him go. When the helicopter vanished, she turned toward the mountains once more, the same direction she'd come from, the same path she'd survived. The next weeks blurred into a kind of peace. She crossed borders quietly, moving through villages that didn't know her name, trading old metals for food, sleeping in places where war hadn't yet learned the language. Sometimes she'd help locals fix a well, patch a roof, teach a child to steady their hands when aiming at tin cans. Nothing heroic, just small, repairable things. People asked who she was. She always gave a different answer. A medic, a traveler, a teacher. Each lie felt closer to truth than the uniform she'd worn. One evening, while walking through a valley of wild grass in silence, she stopped. The air smelled like rain. The horizon flickered with distant lightning. She sat down, letting the wind move through her hair, and spoke softly, not to anyone, but to everyone she'd lost. Sergei, you were right. They did make me choose between my soul and my orders. A pause. Ward, you said proof doesn't change anything. Maybe not, but it kept their lies from being the only story left. She smiled faintly, eyes closing. And Mom, I finally understand what you meant. Nobody remembers who almost won. The thunder answered like applause from another world. In the following months, her name became legend. Governments denied her existence. Soldiers whispered her story over campfires. Civilians debated whether she was real or propaganda. And somewhere in a data vault deep under Washington, an analyst found a file that wouldn't delete. Corrupted metadata signed BLACKWOOD AC-47. The system flagged it, quarantined it, tried to erase it again. It reappeared. Over and over. Some truths refused deletion. A year later, on the anniversary of the Coral Valley shot, a small package arrived at the office of David Morrison, the contractor she'd saved. Inside, a single bullet casing polished clean, engraved with 4 words. Delivered when it mattered. No sender, no return. Just silence, the kind that speaks louder than anything else. Back in the Highlands, Arya lived simply. She tended a small garden behind an old stone house, grew mint, thyme, and silence. Sometimes local children would visit, calling her Miss Ari. They didn't know who she'd been. She preferred it that way. But every morning before the sun rose, she'd climb a nearby hill, look east, and watch the light hit the mountains. And for a moment, she'd feel it again, the stillness between heartbeats, the weight of a trigger not yet pulled. Peace disguised as vigilance. One winter evening, as snow began to fall, she sat by the window and listened to the radio she'd rebuilt from scavenged parts. The announcer spoke of investigations, resignations, declassified programs. Driftline was no longer a rumor, it was history. And in that history, her name never appeared. She smiled. That was exactly how she wanted it. Later that night, she wrote in a small notebook neat, simple lines. If truth costs everything, pay it. because the only thing worse than a lie is living quietly inside one. She closed the book, blew out the candle, and whispered into the darkness. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Outside, the snow kept falling. The world for once seemed quiet enough to listen.